Welcome to the second part of the meeting. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have apologies from Councillors Ahmad Wallana, Arnold, Birra, Burrows, Deville, Dott, Graham, Hurangi, Markham, Nelson, Oswell, Saray Puddifoot, Singh and Stead.
Minutes. We all agree with those? Agreed. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Mathers, Councillor Allen.
Mr. Mayor, if item 5 is agreed, then I want to make it clear and make Council aware that I've attended public meetings in regards to the matters in motion 10.3, which I am seconding. And so any of these matters going to a planning committee, which I would be involved in, I wouldn't be involved in. I can take this off if it helps. Sorry, apologies. Habit. Shall I start again? Is that? Yes. Okay, sorry, apologies all. If item 5 is agreed, then I want to make Council aware that I've attended public meetings in regards to motion 10.3, which I'm seconding, and so if this were to come to the relevant planning committee, I wouldn't be involved in discussion or attending that meeting in any way.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wish to declare an interest in 10.1, where it mentions MOPAC. I'm a member of the IAG, so I want it registered. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to my announcements. It's been a difficult start to the year. We had the New Year's parade, which was scaled down by quite a bit, but it was still very, very enjoyable. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who sent Xmas cards to the Mayor's office. Really, very grateful for that. My own one was designed by the Hillingdon's Children in Care. Marvellous. We had 3 different designs on the card, and it was very well received. With the run-up to Christmas, loads of Christmas lights. That was absolutely fantastic. The feedback that we got from residents that I met, really cheer. They go, the troubles that we're still going through, going through our local high streets, it really did cheer them up, which long may that last. I attended a lot of Xmas teas as well. And on that point, Madam Mayor, my wife has put me on a diet apparently for my New Year resolution. But I reminded her that last Friday was the first time I came to the Civic Centre 35 years ago. So 35 years, last Friday, was the first time I ever came here. And who would believe, I'll be sitting here in this position today. If anybody asks why I remember 35 years ago, that was the time I got married to my lovely wife downstairs in the Civic. So thank you very much for that. And the final bit of my announcement is to actually congratulate another one of our members who I remember has worked extremely hard for us, done awfully well, and he's turned 50. And if you can't guess who it is, I'll tell you it's Councillor Scott Stephen Divvy. And Scott, congratulations. Well, move on to the business end now. Agenda item 5, Councillor Curlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I formally move the changes to committee membership as printed on the order paper. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, I second and formally reserve my right.
Are there any other speakers? Is that agreed? Agreed. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This council has a statutory obligation to calculate and approve its council tax base and business rates forecast by the 31st of January each year. Following this, a submission to the so approved forecast information is required to be submitted to the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. The council tax base is calculated in terms of the equivalent numbers of Band D homes within the borough. In overall terms, the council tax base in Hillingdon is calculated for 22-23 at 103,840, which is an increase on that determined for 21-22 of 1,769 Band D properties. This increase is largely due to the continuing trend of more homes being built, which amounts to a net increase of 1,012, and a reduction in the number of claimants using the council tax reduction scheme, amounting to 775. Members will recall that last year a surge in the use of the CTRS occurred as a consequence of the pandemic and actually caused an overall reduction in our council tax base. Finally, a very small reduction of 18 properties is attributable to a minor adverse change in our collection rate. Mr. Mayor, turning to business rates, the forecast of retained business rates for Hillingdon for 22-23 is £56.5 million, which represents an increase of £1.4 million over the income derived for 21-22. And this improvement is attributable to the economic recovery achieved by our local business community following the COVID-19 lockdowns. The Council will, of course, be passing on to local business the various central government-funded COVID-19 business rate support packages announced by the Chancellor of Exchequer. Mr. Mayor, I therefore move recommendations A, B, C and D set out on page 13 of the order paper. Thank you.
Do we have a second? Councillor Edwards.
I second and reserve my rights. Thank you.
Any other speakers on that? Is that agreed? Thank you. Go on to agenda item 7. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. This matter deals with the process for the procurement and appointment of external auditors for the 5 years commencing 23-24. Public sector audit appointments is a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee, which was established by the Local Government Association in order to provide national procurement exercises for local authorities. Hillingdon has used the services of PSAA in the past, and there are numerous advantages which have been identified, not the least of which are the cost and efficiency savings of participating in a national scheme as opposed to running our own in-house procurement process. I therefore move the recommendation set out on page 19 of the agenda pack that the Council opt in to the PSAA national scheme for the provision of external audit services. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Edwards.
Mr. Mayor, I second and reserve my rights. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Is that agreed? Going to 8. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 8 is the adoption of the Council Housing Strategy 2021-22 to 25-26. A comprehensive and lengthy consultation has been carried out. The document has been approved by Cabinet and has been considered by the Environment, Housing and Regeneration Select Committee. I move the recommendation that this strategy is adopted.
Do you have a second? Councillor Bianco.
Mr. Mayor, I second and reserve my right.
Any other speakers? Is that agreed? Thank you. Move on to agenda item 9. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the Cabinet member please give an update on the Stronger Families Hub and the benefit of this approach for our families? Thank you.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for your question. I'm sure by now the Chamber and members recognises the pride I have for all of the staff working within my portfolio of health and social care. My answer to this question will continue to showcase that pride and respect as this innovative Stronger Families Hub was launched on the 2nd of August last year, while social care, response and delivery was being drastically remodelled due to the ongoing COVID pandemic. The Stronger Families Hub is an ambitious 24-hour hub that delivers services to residents 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Understandably, this has been very well received by our residents. All of us who have brought up families or have supported others doing so can understand, I am sure, the times when a reassuring voice, someone to help you make a decision, or some professional advice is sought. To be able to have a service 24 hours a day does much to support our families and ensure they have quick professional responses. This in turn helps to maintain better mental health and allows our families to cope with the anxiety of parenting. This work has been achieved through strong, effective partnerships between professionals, as well as meaningful collaborative working with parents, carers and young people. Our move to the Stronger Families Hub model was to focus on putting our children and families first and providing even easier access to support by creating a comprehensive single point of contact. No one likes to have to tell the same story repeatedly, particularly whilst in a crisis. To achieve this ambition, the Hub streamlined many of the previous processes and became the single gateway to accessing a variety of support, together with services from Children's Social Care, Special Educational Needs Service, Portage, Youth Justice and Education. This single point of contact includes single phone number, a single email address and a single referral form, and it can be accessed through the Council's website. This approach therefore makes it easy for professionals and residents to ask for help and support for any child in Hillingdon. This Stronger Families Hub is responding to the increase in the need of our residents. For example, we have seen an increase of 1,000 contacts a month related to children and their families between September 2019, prior to the pandemic, and in September 20, when the hub went live. In the first 5 months of its activity, this hub has received just under 10,000 contacts, with more than 4,200 of them submitted via the new online referral portal. The hub initiated intervention and support for just under 700 families through these Stronger Family locality teams. These teams are in the north, southwest and southeast of the borough, with up to 8 key workers and a team manager for each. The resource development and location was based on the analysis of level of need across our borough. By addressing needs early through the hub, we are seeking to empower families to become more resilient through being helped to gain support earlier and without cases needing to have to meet a threshold for statutory intervention. This type of timely support will avoid the escalation that may otherwise result in children requiring a child in need or a child protection plan. Programmes delivered through the hub also aim to reduce the risk of young people being involved in the youth justice system, being criminally exploited and or being remanded. A good example of this support is the comprehensive offer from the Adolescent Development Services, supporting our children and young people up to the age of 25 with early mental health support through our LINK team, substance misuse support through Sorted, and sexual health support through KISS. Work is ongoing in each locality to continue to develop the local partnership networks and resources across statutory and non-statutory partners. This obviously strengthens the locality's response to the needs of our residents. The development and progress of this work is supported and scrutinised by Hillingdon's Safeguarding Partnership Board to ensure that early help and safeguarding priorities are coordinated and aligned. I have observed the design, the build and the subsequent opening of this hub. I had the pleasure of jointly opening this with the leader last year. I have watched it grow from a cold, empty building site to a bespoke, warm, welcoming environment where our families and young people can benefit from high-quality support. It is filled with bright modern design that displays age-appropriate toys and books. It immediately relaxes the residents and dispels the image of what social care can actually look like. It shows this authority is forward-thinking, proactive, and understands we need to work to meet the needs of our residents in ways which make for comfortable and professional decision-making. The Stronger Families vision is to empower families to be and feel strong, safe and healthy through the provision of early and targeted support to reach their full potential. To achieve this vision, we need to respond to need when it arises and work together to ensure we have the right person for the child and family leading the right intervention. Particular thanks must go to Tony Zeman, who I also congratulate on his recent appointment as Interim Chief Executive. Also, Sandra Taylor and Claire Fry for their work in this successful rollout. It is a testament to this authority, its leadership and its social care staff that whilst in a pandemic we can continue to carry out service delivery and remodel and roll out new ways of thinking. I will leave you with a quote from a parent who was supported through Stronger Families. Thank you for everything you have done for me. You have helped me through my toughest times. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we go to 9.1. Councillor Prince.
Can the Cabinet member please inform us how the Council has promoted the draft budget consultation to residents?
Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Prince, for your question. The draft consultation budget was first considered and publicised at a meeting of the Cabinet on the 16th of December 2021. This item was included in Part 1 element of the Cabinet agenda, and hence it was broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. The detailed budget report and supporting appendices were published on the Council's website as part of the agenda for the Cabinet meeting, and were hence available to all residents. A press release and social media announcements were issued on the 17th of December 2021, reporting Cabinet's approval of the draft budget, and this was supplemented by a news item which was posted on the Council's website, giving a summary of the main headlines of the budget and providing the detailed budget report and supporting appendices. This item invited residents to participate in the consultative process by submitting comments, and the deadline for the receipt of these was listed as the 30th of January 2022. The draft budget was also featured prominently in the January to February 2022 edition of Hillingdon People, which is delivered to every household in the borough. The leader referred to the headline rate of council tax in his welcome comments, and a further full page contained greater detail and once again invited comment. Subsequently, the Council's select committees are considering examining the budget proposals which are relevant to their areas of focus. These meetings are broadcast on YouTube and offer further insight to residents. Finally, Mr. Mayor, the Conservative administration has made a commitment to accessibility, openness and clarity in the way in which the Council communicates with residents. And the 22-23 budget report is a shining example of this, as it made it far easier for residents to assimilate the proposals and to respond to them in the manner in which they choose to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a supplementary?
Yep, I do.
Just to remind people, the supplementary is about what the answer's given or on the original question. Yeah?
Yes.
A general reminder to everybody.
No problem. Can the Cabinet member please confirm that in light of only 22 responses from residents being received at the time of this question being submitted, whether A, he shares my disappointment that the consultation was so poorly promoted in the first half of the consultation period and takes full responsibility, or B, that this was a political decision to minimise awareness of the dangerous financial position that this administration is in?
Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, perhaps Councillor Prince would like us to follow the example of one of the icons of the Labour movement, no other than the Mayor of London, Mr. Sadiq Khan. If I look at the gargantuan public relations machine which he presides over, and the gargantuan budget which takes care of it, it's perhaps interesting to note that the Greater London Authority's budget it was actually published on the GLA website.
Point of order. How is this related to my question?
I'm coming to that.
Sorry. Let the member answer the question first.
It was published on the 22nd of December, and the cut-off date for comments is the 18th of January. Furthermore, there is actually a misleading indication as to the headline rate of the mayoral precept. You have to go to page 119 of a 124-page document to find the answer. By contrast, this local authority has published the budget proposals and given its residents plenty of time, a full month actually, the full month of January, in which to respond. Now, if I look at the responses as they stand today, they have increased to 48 from the 22 which I believe was identified as of the 4th of January. And furthermore, perhaps I can advise that of the 48 who responded, 75% said that they were satisfied with the proposals in that budget. So perhaps it isn't a question of disappointment, it's rather more that the silent majority are extremely happy with what this Conservative administration is delivering in terms of excellent financial control and budgetary process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We move on to 9.4. Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member please update Council on the unprecedented admissions for in-year school places to children in the Borough for this academic year?
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank Councillor Bridges for asking a question regarding this academic year's in-year admissions for this council. In September 2021, I reported to Council that Hillingdon had successfully offered and processed in total 7,271 reception and Year 7 school places, respectively based on the National Offer Day position. I also reported that in addition to those applications, Hillingdon had also received by September 2021 500 further in-year applications. In the first 3 months of the current academic year, from the 1st of September, Hillingdon has experienced an excessive volume of in-year applications, and by the end of term in December, this figure stood at 1,754. Across our mainstream settings this year, we have, on average, in one term, 50% of applications in comparison to what the Council would usually expect in one academic year. That total is based on the past 5 years' data figures. Finding places for older secondary school pupils can be more challenging, but once again, the admissions team and other officers have supported pupils and schools to ensure places can be offered. Fair access panel meetings are convened usually once a month. This is to manage children who do not have a school place, who are vulnerable or who are hard to place. However, by November, 5 meetings had already taken place. This is an extreme burden not only on our admissions officers, but also on the panel members that are convened out of from schools, head teachers, etc. In total, 91 children have been placed this year so far through the Fair Access panel. This is a 36% increase compared to the same time last year. To date, there are currently 66 children waiting for a school place to be confirmed from applications that have been received in December or January 2022. These applications are still within the targeted time for processing, and the admissions team are waiting for schools to respond to outstanding applications in order to confirm their placements. Not only has Hillingdon had an influx of children requiring school places, a similar number of pupils have also moved away, creating considerable turbulence within our schools. The primary sector has been impacted more than our secondary schools, and some schools have been affected more substantially by this than others. I would add to that other London boroughs are having similar experiences. There is a lot of churn in schools at the present time, and with movement not only from immigration and asylum-seeking families, but also movement of families around the country and around London boroughs. This pressure has meant that our officers have had to work expeditiously and remain flexible with schools, ensuring school places are offered quickly, not only to ensure that schools are keeping healthy numbers on roll, but also to our residents that are looking for school places for their children. The Council continues to work hard to ensure that it's meeting its statutory responsibilities in that all children are allocated a school place within a reasonable time frame, whilst maintaining good working relationships with our schools. Through creative use of resources and strong teamwork, the Council ensures that applications have been processed rapidly to ensure all children are offered school places. It would be remiss of me at this time not to thank our officers who are dedicated ensuring in that we get our children into school, but also to our Hillingdon schools that are working with us to ensure exactly the same. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do we have a supplementary?
No, Mr Mayor, and I thank the Cabinet Member for the answer she's provided.
We move on to 9.3, Councillor Egerton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The London Borough of Hillingdon is negotiating with the Department for Education to enter into a safety valve agreement. It is hoped that this agreement will provide central government assistance to reduce the cumulative deficit on the Hillingdon's Dedicated Schools Grant, which is expected to reach at least £46 million in 2024. That is equivalent to £150 for each and every resident in Hillingdon. Can the Cabinet Member please explain the reasons and responsibilities for causing the deficit? Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank Councillor Eggington for his question regarding the safety valve agreement that we are currently negotiating with the Department for Education. Funding pressures since the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities SEND reforms in the Children's Act 2014 have compounded nationally, and within London in particular, the increasing deficit has risen from a number of factors. An increase in identifying pupils with special educational needs, changes to funding methods, and having enough provision for children and young people who require specialist placements in either a specialist resource provision and or a special school. In 2014-15, this council's high needs population stood at 1,503 pupils. However, this figure has increased significantly, and by April 2021, the number of pupils with an education, health and care plan, an EHCP, which I will refer to that in the rest of my answer, is standing at 2,855. This represents an increase of 1,352 pupils in the last 5 years. This growth in EHCP started to become apparent in the dedicated school grants financial position from 2015-2016 with a deficit of £3.2 million. In addition, the 2014 Act extended SEND provision from the statutory school age, which is 5 to 16 years, to 0 to 25 years of age. This created a significant rise in the growth of EHCPs. The funding landscape to address the rise in EHCPs has also been subject to change. In 2017-18, the Council implemented funding transfers from the schools block to the high needs block, totalling £11.5 million. However, by 2017-18, statutory changes supporting the move to the national funding formula were implemented. In an effort to mitigate the impact of this, Hillingdon made 1 year school blocks transfer in 2018-19 and in 2019-20. However, subsequent disapplication requests were not approved by the Education and Skills Funds Agency. In addition, a review of the high needs funding formula in 2020, alongside the SEND2, that's the collection of data about children that the local authority has responsibility for the management of the special educational needs processes, highlighted that this council's high needs funding per EHCP was the 4th lowest in London, 28th out of 32 boroughs. In recognition and to mitigate pressures on school-based budgets in mainstream schools, this has been recently addressed by the ongoing development of SEN pre-statutory pathways to ensure appropriate provision is provided prior to a formal request for an EHCP. Finally, with local special schools starting to reach capacity to meet the needs of pupils who require specialist settings, as well as the same time as rising numbers of children and young people with special educational needs, the unit costs of providing support has also increased due to more young people and children accessing further specialist forms of provision. The movement of children and young people with EHCPs out of mainstream schools and into special schools, whether they're maintained academies, independent schools with the special school status, has increased on our financial pressures. In terms of responsibility, it is not this administration's policy to argue about the origins of significant challenges. We much prefer to work together to find a solution. As part of the strategy to address the deficit within the high needs block, council officers are working very hard and at pace to deliver an achievable outcome with the Department for Education by focusing on developing additional local specialist places, improving the support and inclusion within the mainstream sector, reducing the reliance on the independent and non-maintained special schools sector, improving the offer of support for parents and their children from 0 to 5, that's that early intervention that we're talking about, increasing the pre-statutory pathways to meet the needs prior to starting an EHCP. At the heart of this, we all want the best outcome for all of the children and young people of this borough, and I'm confident that this Conservative administration is the best place to secure that solution. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that reply. Can the Cabinet Member confirm that the Department for Education has been informed of the failure of this Council to ensure that the special resource provision for children with special needs, paid for by Hillingdon and planned at Ruislip High School, has not been opened, which means that other secondary schools with SRPs are considering closing theirs? Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
I can't say that we have failed at Ruislip High School. We are in negotiations with Ruislip High School and with other of our maintained schools. What they have there at the moment and what the intention is for quite a specialist provision. What I would say to you is that we will continue to work not only with Ruislip High School, but with every school in this borough to ensure that our young people have got a place, whether it's in maintained or in a special provision. Thank you.
We now move on to agenda item 10, Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to move motion 10.4 on waste and recycling. We spend much time debating motions in this chamber, many of which relate to issues where the council has little direct control. This motion is about a highly valued service that impacts all of our residents on a weekly basis, and I repeat, a weekly basis. The service is based on a simple recycling method using one bag, not multiple wheelie bins, which is much valued by our residents who have a simple way of doing the right thing. All streams are collected weekly, including food and green waste, without an additional charge to residents. Unlike neighbouring Labour authorities, we maintained a full service on normal collection days across all waste streams during the recent holiday period. Not only is a wheelie bin service leave a collection of unsightly bins everywhere, and I could witness a number of local boroughs where that is the case, but the current cost estimate for introducing it across all streams would be some £15 million. And I think we can all spend £15 million on far better things. Given that such a service has slower loading times, it inevitably increases the staff resource required and leads to pressure for fortnightly collections, a trend that has been seen in many neighbouring authorities. This administration will continue to maintain this excellent service and continue to promote the food waste service. A recent exercise in Hayes Town Centre has increased take-up by 100 houses a week. I have witnessed the excellent work being done by the council recycling team to improve recycling facilities in our flatted developments. Across the last year, they have visited nearly 10,000 properties to engage with residents on recycling. Improvements are being made to recycling in flatted developments to make them better organised and improve signage. All of our new developments will include space for food waste recycling, and I am delighted to announce that beginning in February, we will be rolling out food waste collection in 3 of our smaller flatted estates, one in Ruislip, one in Uxbridge and one in Hayes. We will evaluate the results of this and then continue to roll out throughout 2022. All of our residents, regardless of where they live, can access our new textiles and small electricals recycling service. I must take this opportunity to pass my thanks to our excellent crews who turn out all year regardless of weather conditions to deliver the service. And my compliments to our waste team who've been recognised by winning 2 national awards in 2020 and 2021. I urge all councillors to support this motion to maintain our excellent free collection service on a weekly basis and reject the use of wheelie bins in this borough. I so move.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mills.
I second this motion and reserve my right.
Do you have any other speakers? Councillor Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the Conservative group are rattled. Wheelie bins, eh? Where have I seen that recently? Yes, Hillingdon Labour have been asking residents what they think about food waste collection, and we're asking them what they think about wheelie bins. And here's a fun fact for the Conservative group. Our wheelie bin consultation has so far got more responses than their budget consultation, many times more. Because this side of the chamber cares about consulting with residents about what they want in their community, not just telling them like this administration. But I can't blame the Conservatives for looking to Hillingdon Labour for ideas to talk about. They have long run out of steam and are stumbling along till May, where they can take a breather and not worry, because Hillingdon Labour will be in charge. For the record, Hillingdon Labour are committed to weekly collections. You can write that in stone. Mr. Mayor, this amendment was submitted for 2 reasons. 1, to highlight that the service this administration sings and dances about has some serious gaps. Firstly, if you live in a flat, it is subpar. You currently aren't entitled to food waste collection. I don't understand why it's supposedly been such a logistical challenge to extend rollout of food waste collection and why houses were prioritised. Because residents who live in flats often have nowhere to put full bin bags inside their home, and if they put them outside, the food waste will attract foxes and rats. The bags get ripped open, food and other waste is all over the pavements, and this is the excellent service that the council likes to sing and dance about. The issue of street cleaning is also a failure of this administration's waste collection policy. Street cleaners come the day before the bins are collected. So, for example, if your bin gets collected on a Tuesday and there is lots of rubbish on the pavement from bags splitting open and being ripped apart by animals, the rubbish left on the ground won't get cleaned up until the following Monday when the street cleaners come. And then the following day, the process happens all over again. I asked why street cleaners can't come after the rubbish has been collected, but I was told this wasn't possible. So residents are left with rubbish strewn all over the streets after the bins are collected. And this is a good service. The second reason for this amendment was to thank the staff, the hard-working people behind the scenes who do their genuine best to help residents and councillors. They can only do so much as the administration permits them to do. let me be clear, Mr Mayor. The Hillingdon Waste Collection Service is good. We don't disagree. But we think it can be better. And it will be better under a Labour administration. I move. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would first like to thank the Conservative group for reading our latest batch of leaflets and giving us the opportunity to debate an area of council services that are good but could be better. After the debate so far this evening, perhaps I could add a bit of clarification. The Labour group spent the summer listening to residents across the borough, and one of the issues that was brought up by residents was that of waste collections, particularly the increasing number of flats and the need for better waste and recycling facilities, that residents in flats can enjoy the same level as their neighbours in houses. One thing we did note is that a number of residents, particularly in the north of the borough, had purchased their own wheelie bins. This prompted us to ask residents for their views on the subject. Mr Mayor, I'm happy to announce that our survey has confirmed that this is something of a Marmite subject. Some people love them, some people hate them, but there's not much in between. So we have absolutely no intention of imposing anything on our residents when we form the next administration in May. However, Mr Mayor, we will continue to listen to our residents and work in partnership with them to ensure that their services are improved. Hence, this amendment, which reflects the improvements that the residents have highlighted to us as being necessary. Mr Mayor, whether in opposition or administration, we are committed to making Hillingdon a better place to live and work. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, just to confirm, we are now discussing the amendment as shown in italics in the two paragraphs at the top of page 4 on the order of business.
Do you have any other speakers on this? Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It will not surprise the Labour group to learn that we will be rejecting this amendment. As I've already made clear, we are already ahead of the game, and you will not be forming the next administration. So when we continue to do it, we will continue to roll out in the way that we are. We do listen to residents, and interestingly enough, we get more compliments about waste than many other things. Flats do have a service, unlike what Councillor Prince would suggest to us. Most blocks of flats, in fact, have large bins downstairs for waste, and that is the model that largely will pertain in flats. If you want your residents to have less waste or less items on the street, the best way of eliminating bags getting opened is to take the food waste service. So all of those who put their bags out on the street live in a house and can do that. The vermin is attracted to food waste in general, and if you reduce the volume of that, not only is it better for recycling and a better way to dispose of your waste, it will also alert you to how much you use, but it will actually give a cleaner result. So we will oppose the amendment.
Councillor Prince.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A few things there. Firstly, he speaks very confidently, and I must admire it very confidently for a member of a party that's in such turmoil, but I'm sure we all have our own thoughts on that. He also said that, the Cabinet member also said that waste impacts people on a weekly basis, but no, it doesn't. It impacts people on a daily basis, not a weekly basis, especially for those who have to face it every single day because they don't have things such as food waste bins. I appreciate what the Cabinet member said about the rollout of food waste in flats starting in February, but it doesn't explain the delay, and it's only a few estates, and I'm still not clear on why this has taken so long. And the Cabinet member also talks about flats having communal bins. Maybe you should come and take a visit to the south of the borough, because that's simply not true in many cases. I live in a flat, I don't have a communal bin, I don't get food waste bin collections. We have a big problem with rats and foxes ripping bin bags open. I'm more than happy to invite him round if he would like to come and see the problem for himself. Thank you.
Thank you. We're just going to go to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? The motion is lost.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We return now to the original motion. I have no other speakers other than Councillor Mills, who's reserved his right, and Councillor Lavery, who has a right to reply.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of our motion is to reiterate what is one of the most popular services that this council gives to its residents. And I think that is evidenced not just by the feedback, but also by the evidence that the crews themselves pick up as they go round and are appreciated. But I think we need to also recognise that in terms of what it is built upon that makes it so popular, and the risks of changing it too much that could dismantle that basic principles. The fact that it is easy to use is at the heart of it, and that's what must be preserved at all cost. Of course, there are needs to improve and amend, and as Councillor Lavery has outlined, work is in progress to make sure that happens, including flatted developments. Weekly collections are absolutely important, and that is what people absolutely value. And the judgment that the people of Hillingdon will have to make is, do they trust the existing council providing an easy-to-use weekly service, or do they want to gamble and see what has happened with every other Labour organised run around our neighbours, which has moved away from weekly collection, has made it more difficult to do, has imposed wheelie bin avenue down every road, and has started charging for certain aspects of the collections. That is the broad choice, and on that basis, we are very confident to say to our residents, yes, Labour in Hillingdon are proudly boasting that waste will be better under Labour. But the only waste that will be better under Labour is their usual waste of misspent money, misspent resources, more chaos, more debt, more promises, more non-delivery, everything that they did before this authority in Hillingdon became Conservative-controlled and gave you not just weekly, easy-to-use waste, but all the other services that put residents first. That is our offer. We are focused on that, and we are happy to take up the challenge. And yes, wheelie bins, if people wish to do it themselves, great. But an imposition of wheelie bins, which will be the consequence of mucking around with the waste service, is something that we will oppose strongly, door to door, in key areas from Harefield, particularly Heathrow, and all the way from Uxbridge out to Yedding, because we know where people and what people value. It's not the waste of Labour, it's a resident-first Conservative council.
Yeah. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing further to add.
We'll go to the vote then. Those for the motion? Those against? Motion is carried. We now move to 10.1. Councillor Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Me again. Like many young people, young women in particular, I was stunned and then horrified at the abduction, rape and murder of Sarah Everard and the murder of Sabina Nessa, and today the news of Ashlyn Murphy. And it isn't just violence against women, it is antisocial behaviour, it is knife crime, an issue we are all too familiar with here in Hillingdon. I will be very clear, street lighting will not fix all this. The fix requires significant investment in early intervention and prevention. It requires properly funded youth services in every community. Street lighting will not prevent all violence, but it might prevent some. Mr. Mayor, when we see or hear something awful has happened, such as an abduction or a murder, we look to ourselves and question what we can personally do. This is something we can personally do. The Labour group, through our extensive door knocking in the borough, have heard from many residents about how unsafe they feel in their communities, particularly in autumn and winter due to the darkness. I have submitted members' inquiries about inadequate street lighting, on resident concerns about drug dealing in the dark corners in the ward, about sex workers conducting their business in public spaces in alleyways and garages. The immediate reaction might be that the police should be called, but often the crime isn't lasting long enough for that to be an effective deterrent. Prevention is the most appropriate measure when it comes to these issues. Take away the dark corners. Give residents assurance that crimes aren't being committed just feet away from their door. Members' inquiries do not work because it pushes reviews into the long grass. There needs to be a rethink that comes from the top of the council about how street lighting can deter crime and how street lighting can make people feel safe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Mathers.
I second and reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be voting for the motion. Now, I know that this will disappoint Councillor Prince. The matter she raises are serious and her desire to do good is genuine. We all want to do what we can to make our area safer, but unfortunately, this motion does not advance the Hillingdon Safer Neighbourhood agenda. The motion would take officer resources and cabinet time away from dealing with crime. We'd be forcing them to attend meetings that are not relevant to Hillingdon's needs and to produce extra paperwork just so an administrative box is ticked. For a start, we do not need to slavishly follow every initiative and press release that comes out of City Hall. The Mayor of London seems to forget that Hillingdon is part of London. He has made so many decisions that are incompatible with Hillingdon, the most obvious one being shutting Uxbridge Police Station. I seriously question whether he cares about us. I also don't understand why the Labour group is so keen to outsource the running of Hillingdon to Mayor can't find his way to Hillingdon. Secondly, the strategy to improve community safety must always be considered in the whole. There may be instances where a separate sub-strategy is necessary, but Councillor Prince has not convinced me that we must tell officers to create a separate publication focused solely on street lighting. Street lighting is important, but it's something that should be part of our main strategy. Thirdly, the council, cabinet members, officers and local councillors already work proactively with residents and police to resolve safety issues. I'm sure Councillor Riley is going to explain his engagement he has with the police. The External Services Scrutiny Select Committee, which I chair, hosts evidence sessions that hold the police to account for residents. So many of us in this chamber regularly attend our local safer neighbourhood panels and residents associations to discuss community concerns. At all these levels, if street lighting can help, then this will be looked at. What we don't need is a motion telling us all that we must talk about street lighting. I'll finish by saying let's all work together to do what we can to reduce crime and increase public safety. And that I cannot vote for this motion because it does not help us to do this.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, last year saw the worst figures for teenage death by violence in London for 18 years. The 30th victim of death by violent crime happened recently in our borough, usually and consistently one of the safest boroughs in London. The boy, and he was a boy, was found stabbed in Philpotts Farm open space in Useley about 30 minutes after another teenage stabbing in South London. The use of and carrying of knives and blades amongst teenage people has never been worse in London. The current Mayor of London has a woeful track record in this regard and must take a far better grip on this awful situation, its roots, causes and effects. Far more needs to be done across a range of issues, and blaming government funding is not the answer on any level. 27 stabbings, 2 shootings and 1 other death is an unenviable record. Tough on crime and the causes of crime as a hollow ring when applied to this mayor. As a major part of my portfolio, I, together with the leader and senior officers, work very closely with our local policing team at all levels, from the borough commander to the safer neighbourhood teams and every emergency service organisation. All concerned deliver a range of policing and community safety initiatives to provide our residents with community safety and prevention of crime. We actively and positively support Neighbourhood Watch, OWL and other initiatives, because this is an area where we all need to participate and step up. Residents of all ages, groups, police, councillors, we all have a part to play. Our excellent council officer team undertake ward and community action days with local policing teams, integrating the good work done by Community Payback. Street Safe is a pilot scheme where residents can report safety concerns, including lighting issues. But lighting is not a panacea. There is a balance to be struck between lighting and light pollution concerns, which this administration has tackled with innovative solutions. We have made significant investment in our CCTV coverage and use, and continue to do so. We have an excellent CCTV operations centre that has assisted the police on many occasions and gives a sense of safety to our residents. We have delivered, Mr Mayor, and continue to deliver an impressive programme in upgrading and improving public lighting. Mr Mayor, while we can always do more and better, the public safety offer to residents of this borough is effective and impressive. It will always be at the forefront of my civic activities. I thank Councillor Prince for the opportunity of setting out what this administration does. We will not be supporting this motion because we do it already.
Councillor Mathers. We have no other speakers. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, having previously sat on Council's committees looking at how street lighting has been changed over the years, I've heard a lot about the positive impact of newer light lamps, reducing energy consumption, reducing light pollution and reducing costs to the public purse, which is admired. Having researched ways to support communities and help them feel safer, I'm also now aware of the good impact that street lighting can have to reduce crime and good street lighting can have to reduce things such as road collisions. Councillor Prince spoke about the impact of street lighting on community safety, especially in the light of risk of violence towards women, but not just women. And we have heard of the horrible things that have happened recently. All of us want to do something about it, so why not use street lighting as a tool? Hillingdon residents need to feel safe, and the council has the ability to make Hillingdon residents feel safer. It is to the detriment of Hillingdon residents that Hillingdon Conservatives refuse to work with City Hall. They play politics with individual safety. Maybe they prefer to attend work events with the Prime Minister and to discuss Conservative government's cuts to police budgets over the last 10 years. Let them not undermine the role that street lighting can be had as a safety tool for resident safety. Street lighting also improves safety for drivers, for pedestrians. Only a quarter of people that travel by car travel between the dark hours, yet it accounts for 40% of fatal injuries and fatalities and serious injuries. All Hillingdon residents need to feel their roads are safe, and the council has the ability to make Hillingdon roads safer. Street lighting also improves quality of life for the most vulnerable groups in our borough. I've heard many elderly residents say they are afraid to go out in the dark, trapping them in their own homes in the winter months. Often because of the changes that has happened, maybe not through design, but as a consequence, where there are dark patches in between lampposts, and a review is needed to make sure that routes that were once often walked with confidence now have full coverage. It is clear that although street lighting isn't the whole answer, it is part of the tool. And this council can work collaboratively with other agencies and strategically with partners if it so chooses. A Labour Hillingdon Council would work collaboratively, would work strategically, and would help Hillingdon residents to feel and be safer. I urge the Chamber to support this motion despite their prejudice.
Just make sure there's no other speakers. Councillor Prince.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks to Councillor Dennis and Councillor Riley for their responses. That was a lot of words to say no. And the speeches spent a lot of time talking about crime, but not much talking about the prevention of crime. So I fear they may have misunderstood. And Councillor Riley said they're doing it already. If that's the case, you're not doing a very good job. But the residents will have the final say on 5th of May, and we'll see what they say. Thank you.
We go to the votes. Voting for the motion? And those against the motion? The motion is lost. We move on to 10.2. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We need to declare a poverty emergency declaration. We've worked together in order to do this for climate change, and poverty is an issue. My first experience of seeing poverty in a way that overwhelmed me was in 2003 as a young youth worker when I visited Mozambique with a youth group. It was challenging to see such devastating starvation, lack of access to healthcare and education. Thankfully, we in the UK are not in that position. But there was a difference made by the Labour government at the time. As part of the Make Poverty history, Gordon Brown, the Chancellor, forgave debt to Mozambique, which meant when I revisited in 2005, all the children were missing in the mornings. Why? Because they had free access to primary education, a huge advance and a global effort. Experiencing poverty isn't just an international issue, it's a UK issue. In our own borough alone, in parts of it, we have 42% of children in poverty. And even in the more affluent areas, 1 in 5 children experience poverty too. Many more are experiencing this with fuel poverty. We all know bills are going up, we will feel it ourselves. But for many, that is a choice that is devastating. It was really difficult to hear as a local councillor just before Christmas, a family discussing whether they were going to heat their house or whether the adults in that household, the parents, would have food and eat themselves. This is before even thinking about Christmas presents, which I and my children, I'm sure many others, take for granted. Now, there is great work being done by charities and council are contributing, but a strategic approach to eliminate poverty in our borough with the same energy and resourcing, the same streamline with the Climate Change Emergency Action Plan, would have a life-changing impact on the health, well-being of children and families, and also pensioners who may be asset-rich but are struggling to make ends meet. Labour has made a difference in Hammersmith and Fulham by making 3 school meals something for all, meaning children can learn better because they are not having rumbling bellies, but have inquiring minds that they can focus on. I have no doubt the Conservatives will talk about some of the things they have done. A bit similar to the last, there'll be a list of things that are in isolation are done without any strategic drive and passion to help all of our children, all of our families, and all those our residents in this borough. Let's not just focus on small works, but take the focus and the resourcing that we have managed to agree across the chamber with climate change to eradicating poverty in our borough. And it is something that this side and Hillingdon Neighbour are determined to do and will do when in control in May.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me start by wishing everyone in Hillingdon Happy New Year. For many, though, Mr. Mayor, the year will have started with worry. Worry about how they will cope this year. Councillor Mathers has spoken about the increases in prices, and there seems to be no light at the end of the tunnel with fuel prices. However, only yesterday, some of us may have seen something else on the news about food and grocery inflation, and it doesn't seem to be abating. We're all aware that we have residents in our borough who have faced the issue of not knowing where the next meal is going to come from, how they will feed their children, and how they will clothe themselves and their family. Now, one has to applaud our efforts over the pandemic, and it would be wrong to criticise the council's efforts throughout, and that of the staff and the volunteers. They should all be applauded. They have supported the huge increase in demand at our food banks, and we cannot become complacent. This year will be tougher than the last. The £20 uplift in universal credit support, cruelly taken away by this government, will be tapering or ending for most at a time when the cost of living increases. The past is the past, and we cannot compare ourselves, as we normally do, or you guys do, to other boroughs in terms of what we have achieved and what others have not. Our struggling residents don't live there, they live here in Hillingdon, and we have a duty to put the needs of our residents first, as we do. Now, the London Mayor has recognised the need to tackle the causes of poverty and is providing funding to charities across London. We need to provide the support, the advice to those services alongside our borough initiatives. We need to make sure that free school meals are there for our children who need them. Having breakfast, for example, is documented to ensuring that children achieve at school. And the flip side is the danger of being attracted to exploitation and a different kind of life. We all want the best for our children in our borough, and I'm certain of that. But we also need to think how our pensioners in leafy Northwood are prospering. Yes, they are asset rich, but financially they'll be affected by the prices increasing and the cost of living. I'm not looking at you. Mr. Mayor, I'm not asking for cheese and wine parties. I'm seconding this motion so that we recognise we have a significant and incredibly important role that we can play in alleviating poverty, and through this council's strategic thinking and allocation of resources. We must, as a council, step up and follow the Mayor of London's example in having a workable plan to tackle poverty and make Hillingdon a better living place.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I suppose I will follow on from my previous colleagues' comments to start off to say that I am against this motion. Notwithstanding recognising that many of our residents who are experiencing difficult circumstances at the moment. However, from a council's perspective, we have administered and targeted our support to those who are most in need. The council already has a number of schemes that is achieving this, which provide important support to low-income residents of the borough, which have been significantly heightened during the COVID-19 pandemic. The council has administered and delivered the following schemes initiated by central government, and just to help Councillor Mathers, I will list them as he stated that I would. We have the Council Tax Reduction Scheme, we have the Council Tax Discretionary Hardship Fund, the Discretionary Housing Payments, the Winter Grant Scheme and Household Support Grant, Test and Trace Scheme, the Holiday and Activities Foods Programme, and housing grants. This list illustrates how wide-ranging the level of support is. In addition, this administration makes every effort to keep its council tax as low as possible, as well as our fees and charges being the second lowest out of 32 London boroughs. Again, Councillor Mathers talks about drive and passion. Schemes that I have listed out have made a huge difference to families during Christmas breaks. For example, the Winter Grant Scheme, which has covered 11,000 young children in schools with their free school meals during the holiday breaks. Declaring a poverty emergency in the motion is creating a title that is simply populist hyperbole, and this administration works on achieving rather than talking. Councillor Dillon has said that the Mayor of London is giving to charities. However, at the same time, he is increasing council tax by 8.8%, robbing Peter to pay Paul, I would say. One thing where we might agree with this motion is that poverty cannot be treated as a single issue. It's not food poverty or fuel poverty or income poverty, which is why we are proud of this administration's commitment to putting residents first and trying to drive the everyday costs of living down. Hillingdon Conservatives are already on the case. This motion is a motion for motion's sake. Thank you.
Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You won't be surprised to know that I am supporting Councillor O'Brien in the comments she has made already. When I read this motion, I was trying to formulate why and how the Labour group would come up with it. And I tried to imagine, it was difficult, but I tried to imagine myself sitting in the Labour group meeting of a few weeks ago, and it sent a shiver down my spine as I thought of this. Where there were obviously lots of scratched heads, wondering what on earth they could put up as half-decent motions at this council meeting, the last before the local elections. You wouldn't guess though, would you? And I came to the conclusion that someone had the bright idea of going on labourhq.com/motions, and they would have scrolled through the sorry list of motions that were available, and this was the best they came up with. And clearly it was down near the bottom, because it's apparent to all that this has been wheeled out time and time again across the country in various forms. So it's not an original work, it's no original thinking over here. Yeah, someone had a bright idea of a motion some hundreds of miles away. I think it first arrived in Chester West, and it's been in places like Barrow and Cannock and Liverpool, Leeds, Norwich, South Lakeland. Guess what? None of these are Conservative councils. And guess what? And guess what? This was the best they could come up with. Now, poverty is a terrible thing, and it's something that we shouldn't be seeing in 2022. But this council, as Councillor O'Brien has already set out, has a whole range of schemes, funds, payments, grants and programmes to help our residents. And we've helped them best, as she also touched on, but Councillor Goddard earlier touched on, by giving them years of zero council tax rises. And even this year, the draft budget that Councillor Goddard has so carefully put together shows an increase of only 2.8%, against the figure that Councillor O'Brien mentioned of 8.8% from the Mayor of London. 2.8, 8.8. Which would you rather have if you're feeling the pinch? That, as Councillor Goddard also reminded us, is a 41% increase in his council tax since Mayor Khan took over. 41%. If you want profligate spending, then vote Labour. Otherwise, stick with us, because we will actually look after our residents as best we can. Mr. Mayor, we will be voting against this motion.
Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I very much support the comments from Councillor Bianco and Councillor O'Brien. It is yet another example of Labour Party virtue signalling that we have before us. But I'd like to make 2 points in particular about this motion. I'd like to ask members, particularly those who've been around a while, like Councillor Cawthorne, to cast our minds back to the Labour government that left office in 2010, that made addressing poverty apparently its highest priority. And of course, it was in 2009 that the need for a food bank in Hillingdon first became apparent, some time after the case in many other London boroughs. Food banks exist to address some very specific needs, especially amongst the most vulnerable of our residents, and simply speaking of them as though they are purely a response to generalised poverty, when anyone who's been responsible in particular for children's services and social care will know that there are some families for whom this practical help is absolutely essential to ensure that the most vulnerable in our society are fed, should not be seeking to play politics about food banks, especially when they arrived in Hillingdon in what many on the benches opposite would regard as being a period that Labour is enormously proud of. But turning to the Conservative response, I think one of the reasons why motions like this from the Labour Party will fall on deaf ears in Hillingdon is that our residents recognise that getting a job, finding work, is the route out of poverty. And when we look at the Office for National Statistics labour market data for Hillingdon, it gives us an even better idea of why the Labour Party's motion may fall on deaf ears. Because Hillingdon not just has lower unemployment than we find in the rest of the UK and most of London, it's markedly lower amongst young people in Hillingdon. It's markedly lower amongst women in Hillingdon. In fact, when we look at claimant counts for benefits, we have lower claimant counts for benefits for every category of claimant except those who are bereaved. And the availability of jobs in Hillingdon is much greater than across most of the rest of London. So all of these demonstrate that it is the entrepreneurial spirit, the desire to work, that drives so many of our residents. They are not there seeking a council administration or indeed a national government that offers them a dependency culture. They want a council and a government that, despite distractions around Downing Street parties, is nonetheless focused on a vibrant economy that creates opportunity for all not just in Hillingdon, but across the length and breadth of our country.
Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't actually going to say anything tonight, but I've just been putting a few notes down while I was hearing what other people had to say. And once again, Labour has not, as always, explained the whole truth about the facts that they want to try and explain. Yes, there is poverty in this country, and of course it appears in Hillingdon. It is not just the fault of the Conservatives. Councillor Mathers has neglected to explain that 25% of the increase in electric and gas charges is as a result of the Green Levy put in place by Ed Miliband under the Labour government. I'm astonished that that wasn't mentioned. It is all part of the poverty that people in Hillingdon find themselves having to cope with. So perhaps, Councillor Mathers, you can comment on that when you sum up at the end of the debate. Let's have the truth and all the truth, not just knocking the Conservatives when you are to blame yourself.
Just one last check. No other speakers? Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What a passionate response. Finally, some passion from the Conservatives to a complex issue. Unfortunately, answers misguided. There is a difference between Hillingdon Labour and Hillingdon Conservatives. Hillingdon Labour is committed to making the borough better, whilst Hillingdon Conservatives reflect on maybe a few past wins. Hillingdon Labour will strategically work with partners and residents. We will listen, we will consult. We have been and we will continue to. And there are a number of members, it seems, across the chamber who do not seem to care about poverty, which disappoints me. Well, please say differently. I do agree with Councillor Simmons that food banks shouldn't be neglected, but they don't improve employability. Many food bank clients have work. They're struggling to make ends meet. The causes of poverty are complex, and the Conservatives in Hillingdon continue to avoid complex. The difference between Hillingdon Labour is we will challenge complex and we will find ways to help our residents, whereas the Conservatives will bury their heads in the sand. And in terms of where this motion came from a Conservative administration, maybe not saying the word poverty declaration, but through bringing together strategic action to relieve poverty under 10 years ago, bringing together charities and other spaces and places and residents. A distinct difference, not only between Hillingdon Labour and the Conservatives, is that other Conservatives and these Conservatives will bring residents in to take action and tackle complex issues that affect our residents. Please support this motion.
We go to the vote now. That'll be the first one of 2022. Recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Recorded vote has been called for. I'll ask each member in turn if they are voting for the motion, 10.2 as set out on page 5, against the motion or abstaining. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Barnes. Yes. Councillor Bianco. Against. Councillor Bliss. Councillor Bridges. Against. Councillor Brightman. Against. Councillor Chapman. Against. Councillor Chubadar. Councillor Cooper. Against. Councillor Cawthorne. Against. Councillor Curling. For. Councillor Davies. Against. Councillor Dennis. Against. Councillor Dillon. For. Councillor Duncan. For. Councillor Edwards. Against. Councillor Edgington. For. Councillor Farley. For. Councillor Flynn. Against. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Goddard. Against. Councillor Hensley. Against. Councillor Higgins. Against. Councillor Kaufman.
Against.
Councillor Lachmana. Councillor Lavery. Against. Councillor Lewis. Against. Councillor Makwana. Councillor Mathers. Councillor Melvin. Against. Councillor Milani. Councillor D. Mills. Against. Councillor R. Mills. Against. Councillor Money. Councillor Morgan. Against. Councillor Morse. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Palmer. Against. Councillor Prince. Councillor Radia. Councillor Riley. Councillor Rodriguez. Councillor Sansapuri, Councillor Seaman Digby, Councillor Simmons, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Sweeting, Councillor Tuckwell, Councillor Yarrow, Madam Deputy Mayor, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. That motion is lost.
We now move on to 10.3. Yes. Going to call on Glenn Egan for provide some legal advice first.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This motion concerns two sites at Useley and next month's major applications planning committee. There will be a planning application concerning those sites. I therefore need to advise members of the major applications planning committee and any substitutes that if they decide to participate in the debate tonight, they will, when they need to avoid making any comments that could be seen to be prejudging or to prejudging that application, and also to avoid any debate that touches on planning issues. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for that, Glenn. Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I speak not only as an elected councillor, but also as a local resident from a family that has lived in the area for many generations. Indeed, the Curling family can be traced back over generations in the Useley and West Drayton area. My grandfather was born to a family that was well established in Useley, as was my grandmother. My father was born in Pear Tree Avenue, Useley, and I was born in Hillingdon Hospital. So for me, issues like this affect my local area and my local heritage. So for me, it is personal. In the early 1920s, the councillors of Useley and West Drayton Urban District Council and their colleagues on the Middlesex County Council decided that they would protect the land of and around Useley Recreation Ground and ensure that it was forever used for recreational purposes. Back in the early 1920s, they realised that local politicians are here today and gone tomorrow. So to ensure that future generations would benefit from the recreational use of the land, they placed restrictive covenants on that land. This was to ensure that the politicians that followed them could never take the land away from the public. Mr Mayor, this land is not the council's land, it is the public's land in the custodianship of the council. And I firmly believe that as the current batch of here today, gone tomorrow local politicians, we should be honouring those promises enshrined in restricted covenants and not be trying to remove them. So that the land, not trying to remove them, so that the land can be used as a capital receipt to get an administration out of financial difficulties. I also have no problem in standing here and admitting that the land has come under threat from previous administrations, including Labour ones. So my motivation for this motion is not a party political one, because quite frankly, the people of the area have previously been let down by all political parties. My motivation for bringing this motion is to honour the promises and guarantees enshrined in those restricted covenants so that the recreational use of the land can be enjoyed by the residents of today and generations to come. I truly believe that any administration of the council should be working in partnership with the residents to find an appropriate recreational use for the land. Of course, this goes deeper than just one or two sites in Useley, because there are similar covenants on other bits of land across the borough, all of which should be honoured by local politicians of all political colours. I therefore move this motion in the hope that full council will agree to honour the promises and protections put in place 100 years ago, so that the residents in another 100 years' time will still be enjoying the recreational use of the land protected by such covenants. I would therefore urge all members of the council to put the residents first and not be the here today, gone tomorrow politicians that steal the public's land. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do you have a second there? Councillor Mazes.
I second and reserve my right.
Any other speakers? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I recognise that a number of residents have concern about the proposed development and land appropriation referred to by Peter Curling and the impact that this would have on their use of the open land at Useley Recreation Ground. I sincerely wish that I were able to use this debate to directly address those concerns, but I am restricted by the ongoing legal processes, which greatly limits what I and other members in this chamber can say tonight. We must observe due process and cannot fetter or predetermine those planning or land appropriation matters in this debate. It is being said, and the motion suggests, that the council intends to build on the recreation ground, the open space enjoyed by residents. This is not true, and the motion is misleading. In January 2020, Council agreed our local plan Part 2, which clearly shows the land in Useley designated as metropolitan open space. I'm advised that Labour members and their MP had considerable influence in the determination of the boundary of that designation, which they agreed and did not include the old pool site nor the present library site. Going back a bit further in time, in 2014, planning application was considered for the development of the old pool site in Useley that included a residential use. There is no record of any dissension or abstention, Labour included, to the granting of that planning permission on the development of that land. And more recently, in October of last year, Labour members did not use their power to call in the Cabinet decision to commence the process of the appropriation of the land, indicating their contentment with that decision. 3 separate decisions relevant to this motion where Labour did not raise the concern of the form presented tonight. I leave it to others to determine if this motion is more about politics and the forthcoming election than anything else. Turning to the proposed new and probably unique duty that Labour wish to impose on this council to uphold restrictive covenants across the borough. This new duty is uncosted, unfunded, and impractical to discharge. It would fetter future discretion in council decision-making with regarding to its own use of land, which the borough solicitor advises against. Each case must be considered on its own merits, which a blanket policy would not only prevent, but would open the council to challenge and would be wholly inconsistent with the council's duty of proper land management. This motion shows the true nature of Labour's opposition, their inconsistency, their lack of attention to detail, their incompetence by seeking to make commitments without considering the financial, legal or practical issues. The last paragraphs of the motion alone is a commitment that is wholly unacceptable. If agreed, it will place us in a legal quagmire and is alone sufficient for us to oppose
Thank
this
you,
motion.
Councillor Edwards. Do we have any other speakers? Okay. Just stick your hand up so we can see. Thank you. Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak in support of the motion by asking you to consider definition of 2 words. The first being consultation, meaning of which is to exchange information and opinion in order to reach a better understanding when making decisions. The second being the word first, the definition of which is coming before any other. Way back in 2018, I asked in this chamber when the people of Useley would have the opportunity of commenting on the future of their piece of covenanted land gifted to them so very long ago. The answer I received then was when the land was subject to a planning application or when there was a council election, whichever was the sooner. On this basis, it was clear that the consultation would not likely meet the definition, and so it has proved to be. Only a mere 193 consultation letters have been sent out to Useley residents regarding the application, which will see a block of flats erected on land designated by covenant as open space. No plans on this have been exhibited in the existing library, but merely a notice or 2 around lampposts. No public meeting, no interaction between Useley councillors and their residents. No consultation worth its salt, but a mere land grab. Now I come to the second word, first. Putting residents first is used on council vehicles, correspondence, and it's probably carved on the heart of the previous leader of the council, who so very recently gained the freedom of this borough. But have Useley residents been put first here? Have they been put before any other? Well, hardly. For what are Useley residents gaining out of the appropriation of their covenanted land? Yes, a new library to replace the old, but only marginally bigger. But no other community facilities, but merely only more high-rise flats, more road congestion in an area already heavily congested, more pollution, more overlooking and more ugly buildings. Useley deserves better. Hillingdon deserves better, and not this smoke and mirrors consultation which does not merit to be called a consultation. Badly done, Hillingdon, badly done. Please put Useley residents first by supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I feel slightly uncomfortable with this motion. It runs very parallel to the half-acre in Windsor. If anyone wants to look at that particular case, please do. I feel that as there's a planning application coming forward, by us in the chamber discussing that, it's tying the hands of a properly constituted planning committee which has all the facts and all the legal representation to that. And I believe that should be the right place where such a decision be made, and not by a council that's tying its hands.
Do you have any other speakers? Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am happy to have seconded this motion as it protects residents. Restrictive covenants are not just about lands and buildings, but about people and their communities. Years ago, people of the local area or further afield cared so much about their local areas, they gifted it to everyone and each of their neighbours. Land assets for community use. They put residents first. Sadly, a tradition that seems to have gone. Benefits of preserving green spaces and even green flags is important. It's something that we need in order to improve mental health in urban areas and physical health. And there was plenty said at the discussions around the local plan. There was plenty said from West Drayton councillors and Labour representatives, and there was objections. Suburban areas have become urban areas due to the administration's iron fist, and restrictive covenants protect the spaces and places and community assets to keep them in the community and to keep them extremely important. Usually is one of those areas, now metropolitan, urban, however we wish to describe it, that needs good amenities as well as green space. I'm sure we want to see restrictive covenants kept in all wards, protected in similar ways that we have special interest areas or conservation areas. They are another tool in the armour of the council to help put residents and their communities first. As has been commented, there have been a number of excuses. This administration knows all full too well. There is no ability at the moment for Labour to call in Conservative cabinet decisions because we are voted on each committee. These are done behind closed doors or online closed doors. We have raised objections, as Councillor Sweetin highlighted, in council, and we have worked with residents to engage with consultation so they can get their voices heard. Unfortunately, voices that under the Hillingdon Conservatives fall on deaf ears. Residents deserve better. And Labour are better and will be better as a council in May. This is a complex issue, yes. And as the leader of the council has indicated, when there's a complex issue, they choose to take no action. There has been time to amend this motion. There has been time to get the details right so it could be supported by council. Unfortunately, as always, Hillingdon Conservatives have taken no action. I'd ask them, however, to still support it.
Councillor Curley.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, under Standing Order 1212, if I may. Perhaps you could advise me how it could be placed on the record at this meeting that the last Labour administration sought to build social housing on Useley recreation ground. Perhaps you could advise me how that can be on the record.
That's a point of order. Sorry, point of order is regarding when a member feels that there has been a breach of one of the council rules or breach of the law. Are you saying there's been a breach of Council Rule 12 point, which one was it?
Perhaps you can advise me if that was not the correct point of order under which to raise the point of making sure it's on the record at this meeting that the last Labour administration sought to build social housing on a usually recreation ground.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, your ruling is final, but that doesn't appear to be a breach of a council rule. You're saying a point of order can only raise an alleged breach of a council rule or a breach of law. I'm not sure you're saying there has been a breach of a council rule.
Well, perhaps Mr. Mayor can advise me whether or not that proposal of the previous Labour administration can now be on the record at this meeting.
A point of order. You can't raise something now. You should have raised.
Got up earlier. Give us 2 seconds. Let me just have a chat with Lloyd. I get the point that you're making, Councillor Simmons, but I don't believe that's a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I accept your ruling. I'm glad, however, I raised the point that the previous Labour administration sought to build social housing on usually.
Come on, Mr. Mayor, this is a joke.
I've ruled that it's not a point of order. Councillor Curlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps I can help Councillor Simmons, MP. In my speech, I did say I have no problem standing here and admitting that the land has come under threat from previous administrations, including Labour ones. So
you've had your time to debate.
So it is on the record. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, I'm not surprised. I am saddened. I'm not surprised that the Tory group are not going to be supporting the protections put in place by wise people 100 years ago. I would say that you know you only run into legal problems with covenants if you try and get rid of them, and the whole reason for them being there is to make it difficult for you to do that. So, I mean, the council hasn't faced any legal problems over the covenants on this land for at least 100 years. If they decide not to sort of land grab it, then there will be no legal problems for them to face. So I can't see the problem in actually committing to upholding restricted covenants across the borough, wherever they are, because they're put there for a purpose. If that purpose no longer exists, then perhaps there's some sort of room to negotiate the use of the land with the residents. As I say, Mr. Mayor, I am not surprised at the outcome of this, and I just stand in amazement at some of the debates this evening. I mean, we've seen this administration vote against things that they claim to be doing. Never could quite understand the logic of that. Perhaps they really don't trust their own actions. And it seems to be that they're saying with this motion that they won't impose wheelie bins on the borough, but they will impose potential overdevelopment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, can I please invite the Borough Solicitor to advise on the lawfulness of the proposal being put forward, that the Council in perpetuity will be bound by this motion, and whether or not they can do that.
Can I just rule, Mr. Mayor, that I believe what you're trying to make is a point of personal explanation, which is where you believe a member has misunderstood some part of your speech.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The legal position is that the Council has in law for 90 years at least had power to override restrictive covenants where it considers it appropriate to do so in the public interest. I could never advise the Council to pass a resolution that the Council would never seek to use that power. That would simply be inconsistent with the Council's land management in the public interest. Whether it's appropriate to seek to override a public interest is, of course, a matter for judgment of members and not for officers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think that explains it. Right, we can go to the vote. Those voting for the motion?
Mr. Mayor, just before we vote, could we just, those members, planning and SUD, following today's comments, just advise, should we vote or not vote on?
I think the advice was quite clear
yeah,
from
I've had
Glenn.
it. Just want to make it.
I mean, he made that is why I brought him in at the beginning, because it is a complex issue. I mean, I sat on the planning committee myself, and you know, you can't have Glenn, could we explain that once again, please?
Yes, Chairman, the role of the Majors Planning Committee is to consider the planning application on its merits in accordance with the Planning Code of Conduct. If any member has said anything tonight, if the member of that committee has said anything tonight that might impact on their ability to determine that on its merits, then they will be precluded from sitting on the they'll be precluded from sitting on the Major Applications Planning Committee when the planning application is considered. I think generally tonight there's not been any substantive discussion of planning merits, but I do leave it up to individual members of the Majors Planning applications to whether they wish to consider whether they should vote or not tonight. I'm afraid this is not a suitable forum for me to give individual advice to individual councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, I believe there were 7 members stood asking for a named vote. So I will be asking each member in turn if they are voting for motion 10.3 as moved by Councillor Curling, seconded by Councillor Mathers, against it or abstaining from voting on it. Councillor Allen. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Bianco. Councillor Bliss. Councillor Bridges. Councillor Brightman. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Tubadar. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Cawthorne. Councillor Davies. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dillon.
For.
Councillor Duncan. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Edgington. Councillor Farley. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Goddard. Councillor Hensley. Councillor Higgins. Councillor Kaufman.
Against.
Councillor Lakmana. Councillor Lavery. Councillor Lewis. Councillor Makwana. Councillor Mathers. Councillor Melvin. Councillor Milani. Councillor D. Mills. Councillor R. Mills. Councillor Money. Councillor Morgan. Councillor Morse. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Palmer. Councillor Prince. Councillor Radia. Councillor Riley. Councillor Rodrigues. Councillor Sansapuri. Councillor Seaman Digby. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Sweeting. Councillor Tuckwell. Councillor Yarrow. Madam Deputy Mayor. Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, if you just give me one moment, there are a number of abstentions. I just want to make sure. Yes, Mr Mayor, that motion is lost.
Thank you very much. Before I formally close, I also want to thank the audience that we have here. We've got some guests there as well, and the press. Thank you very much. I formally close the meeting.